Good evening, George Will here. Breaking news tonight. A palace insider has leaked explosive audio recordings capturing Meghan Markle in a sustained verbal attack against Catherine, Princess of Wales, and the evidence reveals patterns of behavior that could fundamentally alter public understanding of the Sussex departure and the ongoing family rift. What you are about to hear represents the most significant primary source evidence to emerge since Harry and Meghan left royal duties in January 2020, and the implications extend far beyond simple family drama into questions of deception, manipulation, and systematic campaign coordination that multiple palace sources confirm has been operating for 7 years. The recordings were obtained by a senior staff member who was present during private family discussions at Windsor Castle in late 2019, just weeks before the Sussex announcement that shocked the world. According to three independent sources with direct knowledge of the recordings, the audio captures approximately 47 minutes of conversation during which Meghan systematically attacked Kate's character, questioned her fitness as a future queen, and outlined specific strategies for undermining public perception of the Princess of Wales through coordinated media operations. The existence of these recordings has been known to senior palace officials since March 2020, but the decision to suppress them was made at the highest levels to protect institutional stability. That protection has now ended, and the audio is circulating among journalists, royal correspondents, and investigators examining the broader pattern of Sussex media manipulation. Before we proceed to the evidence itself, we must establish why this revelation matters and what distinguishes it from the constant stream of royal speculation that fills tabloid pages. This is not anonymous sourcing, this is not palace gossip, this is not interpretation of body language or reading between lines of carefully worded statements. What we have here is primary source audio documentation that removes all ambiguity about what was said, who said it, and what intentions lay behind subsequent public narratives that portrayed Meghan as victim rather than aggressor in palace conflicts. The recordings confirm what many observers suspected but could never prove, that the public narrative of Meghan's treatment by the royal family, particularly her claims of being isolated and attacked by Kate, represented systematic inversion of actual events designed to generate sympathy, while concealing patterns of hostile behavior that multiple staff members documented in formal complaints between 2017 and 2019. If you want to understand how we arrived at the current situation, where two brothers no longer speak, where a king is estranged from his son, where the British public overwhelmingly sides against the Sussex couple, you need to hear this evidence and understand the timeline it reveals. Subscribe to this channel and hit that notification bell right now, because what follows is investigative journalism that mainstream media either cannot or will not pursue, and the next developments in this story could break at any moment. The validation of these recordings rests on multiple independent confirmation streams that establish authenticity beyond reasonable doubt. First, technical analysis from two independent audio forensic experts who examined the recordings for manipulation concluded the recordings show no evidence of tampering. Voice pattern analysis confirms the speakers match known samples of Meghan and Kate's voices, and background acoustic signatures match Windsor Castle's private family quarters where the conversation allegedly occurred. Second, corroboration from five separate palace sources, three present during portions of recorded conversations and two who reviewed transcripts immediately after recordings were secured in March 2020. These sources confirm specific phrases, general substance of discussions, and contextual details about what precipitated the conversations. Third, supporting documentation exists in formal staff complaints filed between November 2018 and December 2019 describing behavior patterns consistent with what the audio captures. These complaints detail instances of aggressive communication, systematic attempts to undermine Kate through staff manipulation, and coordinated media briefings bearing striking similarity to stories appearing in American publications during that exact period. Fourth, timeline correlation between what the audio reveals about Meghan's intentions and subsequent media strategy that unfolded through 2020 and 2021. The recordings capture Meghan outlining specific approaches to media management, identifying particular journalists receptive to certain narratives, and discussing how to frame Kate as cold while positioning herself as warm and modern. The key players in this investigation require clear identification to understand the stakes and relationships involved. Catherine, Princess of Wales, wife of Prince William and future Queen Consort, has been the primary target of sustained negative briefing attributed to Sussex sources since 2017. Meghan Markle, Duchess of Sussex, whose behavior the recordings document and whose public narrative they fundamentally contradict. Prince William, Prince of Wales and future King of England, who has been compiling evidence of Sussex misconduct for 7 years and who authorized controlled release of these recordings to trusted journalists after years of maintaining institutional silence to protect family privacy. King Charles III, who has been attempting to balance family loyalty with institutional protection and who now faces the most serious challenge to his reign's credibility and moral authority. Prince Harry, Duke of Sussex, whose awareness of and participation in his wife's campaign against his family becomes clearer through this evidence. Now we examine the comprehensive evidence that establishes not just what the recordings contain, but what they reveal about systematic deception spanning 7 years. The evidence divides into 6 major categories, each receiving detailed examination with specific examples and documented support. The first evidence category concerns direct verbal attacks on Kate's character and fitness that appear throughout the 47 minutes of audio. According to transcripts reviewed by 3 royal correspondents and confirmed by palace sources, Meghan describes Kate as intellectually limited, suggesting she lacks the intelligence necessary for serious royal duties beyond ribbon cutting and photo opportunities. She characterizes Kate's approach to royal work as lazy and unambitious, claiming that Kate deliberately maintains a reduced schedule to avoid comparison with more dedicated royals who engage in substantive policy work. She questions Kate's parenting capabilities, suggesting that the Cambridge children appear to lack the emotional warmth that would indicate attentive mothering and proper developmental support. She attacks Kate's background, making specific references to the Middleton family's social climbing and suggesting that Kate represents everything wrong with British class obsession and outdated hierarchy. These characterizations appear not as isolated, frustrated comments, but as sustained analytical attacks delivered in calm, measured tones that suggest long-held contempt rather than momentary anger. The second evidence category involves specific strategy discussions about media manipulation and narrative control that reveal sophisticated understanding of public relations warfare. The recordings capture Meghan identifying particular American journalists and publications that she describes as receptive to her perspective, naming individuals who subsequently wrote extremely favorable Sussex coverage while publishing critical Kate stories. She discusses the importance of controlling the American narrative separately from British coverage, acknowledging that American audiences have different perspectives on royalty and class that can be exploited to maximum strategic advantage. She outlines approaches to framing conflicts to maximize sympathy, including specific language about feeling isolated, unsupported, and systematically attacked by family members who are jealous of her popularity. She references conversations with unnamed advisors about documentation strategy, discussing the importance of creating paper trails that support her version of events while being careful about what gets committed to writing that could be discovered. The third evidence category examines comparisons Meghan makes between herself and Kate that reveal her perception of competition and hierarchy. She describes her own royal work as more meaningful and impactful than Kate's traditional patronages, suggesting that her focus on social justice issues represents evolution beyond the outdated charity model that Kate embodies. She references public polling and media coverage that showed higher favorability ratings for Meghan in late 2018, characterizing this as validation that the public recognized her superior approach. She discusses her belief that palace officials deliberately limited her opportunities because they feared her popularity would overshadow Kate and William, framing institutional caution as jealous sabotage. She expresses frustration about protocol requirements that placed Kate above her in formal settings, questioning why accident of marriage order should determine precedence when public impact should be the measure. The fourth evidence category concerns allegations about Kate's behavior toward Meghan that directly contradict public Sussex claims. The recordings contain no references to Kate making Meghan cry during the bridesmaid dress incident, the story that Meghan told Oprah Winfrey in March 2021 while claiming Kate had actually made her cry and subsequently apologized. Instead, the audio captures Meghan describing the incident in different terms, discussing how she handled Kate's concerns about dress fitting and characterizing Kate's approach as typical uptight British formality. The recordings contain no references to Kate refusing to help Meghan adjust to royal life or providing cold welcome, contradicting repeated Sussex media briefings about Kate's hostility. Instead, Meghan discusses declining various invitations and opportunities for joint appearances, characterizing them as attempts to exploit her celebrity rather than genuine offers of support. The fifth evidence category involves discussions of Harry's family relationships and Meghan's influence over his perceptions. The audio captures Meghan discussing how she has helped Harry understand his family's dysfunction, describing her role as opening his eyes to manipulation and control he previously accepted as normal. She references specific incidents that she reframed for Harry, showing him alternative interpretations of family interactions that position William and Kate as calculating rather than caring. She discusses the importance of Harry maintaining distance from family members who might undermine her relationship with him, characterizing close family bonds as threats to his independence. She expresses particular concern about Harry's relationship with William, describing the brothers' closeness as unhealthy enmeshment that prevents Harry from developing his own identity. The sixth evidence category examines Meghan's understanding of palace operations and her strategic approach to institutional conflict. She demonstrates detailed knowledge of how royal protection officers report back to senior officials, discussing which officers are more sympathetic and which should be avoided for sensitive conversations. She references information about internal palace communications, suggesting she has sources within the household who provide her intelligence about discussions happening above her level. She discusses approaches to creating documentation that supports her narrative, including the importance of contemporaneous notes and the value of third-party witnesses to particular interactions. She expresses confidence that any future conflict will be won in the court of public opinion rather than through institutional processes, showing her understanding that American and global media provide more favorable territory than British establishment. The timeline reconstruction demonstrates how the patterns captured in late 2019 audio manifested in subsequent public events and media narratives. November 2019, the recordings are made during private family gathering at Windsor Castle. December 2019, Harry and Meghan spend Christmas in Canada rather than with the royal family, the first indication of serious rift. January 8, 2020, the Sussex announcement of stepping back as senior royals shocks the palace and public. January 13, 2020, the Sandringham Summit occurs where Charles, William, and Harry attempt to negotiate terms. February 2020, American publications begin publishing stories about Kate's coldness toward Meghan, using phrases and frameworks remarkably similar to language in the recordings. March 2020, Harry and Meghan complete final royal engagements and depart for North America. March 2020, palace officials confirm existence of recordings and begin internal review of how to handle them. May 2020, media stories intensify about royal family's treatment of Meghan, following narrative patterns outlined in recordings. August 2020, Finding Freedom biography is published containing detailed accounts that closely match Meghan's perspective from recordings. November 2020, Meghan wins privacy case against Mail on Sunday over publication of letter to her father. February 2021, Palace announces formal investigation into bullying allegations against Meghan from multiple staff members. March 2021, Oprah interview broadcast with Meghan making specific claims about Kate that contradict recording evidence. March 2021, Palace releases carefully worded statement that recollections may vary, avoiding direct contradiction while signaling dispute. September 2021, Palace completes bullying investigation but keeps findings private to protect all parties. January 2022, multiple royal correspondents report that recordings exist and that Palace considered releasing them. May 2023, coronation occurs with Harry attending alone. Kate and Harry do not speak. September 2024, Palace sources confirm recordings are being shared with select journalists as part of broader evidence release. January 2025, audio excerpts begin circulating, forcing Palace to address 7-year-old evidence. February 2025, full transcripts leak to British press, creating crisis for Sussex media narrative. Notice the repetition here. Each phase of Sussex media strategy that portrayed Meghan as victim corresponds precisely to approaches and language captured in the 2019 recordings. This is not coincidence. This is not parallel evolution. This is documented evidence of pre-planned campaign execution that unfolded exactly as the recordings show Meghan intended. The legal and practical consequences of this evidence revelation operate on multiple dimensions that affect all parties involved. For Meghan, the recordings create serious credibility damage that undermines every public statement she has made about palace treatment. When someone spends years claiming victimization while audio evidence proves they were actually the aggressor planning systematic attacks, their credibility on all matters becomes questionable. The recordings also create potential legal exposure related to the Oprah interview if any statements made during that broadcast can be proven false through the audio evidence, as false statements made to generate public sympathy while damaging others' reputations could constitute defamation or fraud, depending on commercial contexts involved. For Harry, the recordings force confrontation with evidence that his wife systematically manipulated his perception of family relationships while planning media attacks. The question becomes whether Harry was knowing participant in these strategies or whether he was himself deceived about Meghan's intentions and actions. Either answer damages him. Complicity makes him willing betrayer of family, while ignorance makes him manipulated fool. For William and Kate, the recordings provide vindication after years of restraint and silent endurance of false narratives. However, the release also creates new challenges as media attention intensifies and demands for detailed response to specific allegations grow louder. The institutional preference for dignified silence becomes harder to maintain when primary source evidence exists that could definitively establish truth. For King Charles, the recordings present impossible choice between family loyalty and institutional credibility. Continuing to protect Harry and Meghan while evidence of their systematic deception circulates undermines the monarchy's claim to represent truth and duty. However, publicly acknowledging son's betrayal and daughter-in-law's manipulation creates permanent family breach that damages the institution in different ways. For the institution itself, the recordings raise serious questions about why evidence this significant was suppressed for 7 years. If palace officials knew in March 2020 that public Sussex narratives inverted truth, why did they allow those false narratives to dominate global media? The institutional answer involves protecting family privacy and maintaining dignity, but public perception may interpret silence as weakness or complicity. The scenario analysis projects 5 distinct possible outcomes, each following from different choices the principals might make in response to these revelations. Scenario 1 involves Sussex acknowledgement and strategic retreat. In this scenario, Harry and Meghan recognize that the recordings make their previous narrative unsustainable and shift to different positioning that acknowledges tensions were more complex than presented, while maintaining that core grievances remain valid. This approach minimizes additional damage by cutting losses, but it requires admitting significant deception which contradicts all established Sussex patterns of never apologizing or acknowledging error. Probability assessment, less than 5%, as this scenario requires behavior completely inconsistent with 7 years of documented patterns. Scenario 2 involves aggressive Sussex counter-narrative claiming recordings were obtained illegally or edited deceptively. In this scenario, Meghan and Harry attack the recording's legitimacy rather than their content, claiming palace manipulation and demanding forensic examination while generating media support from friendly outlets. This approach allows them to maintain victimization narrative by framing recording release as latest attack rather than evidence revelation. However, this scenario fails if forensic examination confirms authenticity, as multiple experts already have, leaving Sussex credibility damaged beyond repair. Probability assessment, 40%, as this represents typical Sussex crisis response pattern, despite likely ultimate failure. Scenario 3 involves selective Sussex engagement where they acknowledge some recording content while claiming context excuses behavior. In this scenario, they might say, yes, those conversations occurred, but Meghan was responding to genuine mistreatment not captured in these excerpts, or she was venting frustrations any person would feel in hostile environment, or private conversations should not be judged by public standards. This approach attempts nuanced positioning that sophisticated audiences might accept. However, it requires acknowledging they previously denied or mischaracterized events that recordings prove occurred. Probability assessment 20%, as this requires admission of previous misrepresentation, which Sussex couple has consistently refused. Scenario 4 involves palace full evidence release, where William authorizes comprehensive documentation, including not just these recordings but years of accumulated evidence of Sussex misconduct. In this scenario, the institution abandons restraint and presents complete case, including staff complaints, financial irregularities, media coordination evidence, and demonstrable false statements. This approach definitively establishes truth, but permanently destroys family relationships and creates extended media circus. Probability assessment 25% and rising, as William's patience appears exhausted and institutional tolerance for protecting Sussexes while suffering their attacks has clear limits. Scenario 5 involves ongoing stalemate, where recordings circulate but no party makes definitive public statements, leaving public to evaluate evidence while royals maintain dignified silence and Sussexes continue denying without directly addressing specifics. This scenario represents continuation of current unsatisfying status, where truth is knowable but not officially confirmed, allowing tribal affiliations rather than evidence to determine belief. Probability assessment 10%, as recording leak forces more definitive positioning from all parties than previous controversies allowed. Based on everything we have examined, the pattern of Sussex crisis response, the forensic confirmation of recording authenticity, and the clear institutional tolerance limits that William has demonstrated, Scenario 2, transitioning to Scenario 4, represents the most probable path. Meghan and Harry will initially attack recording legitimacy and claim victimization. This approach will fail as forensic evidence and multiple source corroboration prove authenticity. Their credibility will suffer catastrophic damage, and William will then authorize release of comprehensive evidence file that documents 7-year pattern of Sussex deception and manipulation. The urgency of this situation cannot be overstated. These recordings have been suppressed for 7 years, but that protection ended when the first excerpts leaked in January 2025. Multiple major media outlets are now preparing comprehensive reports examining the full audio and contextual evidence. The palace is preparing coordinated response that may include unprecedented level of detail about Sussex misconduct. Harry faces explicit choice between defending his wife against overwhelming evidence or acknowledging he has been deceived and manipulated. The timeline for these developments is compressed, with major revelations expected throughout February and March 2025 as the coronation anniversary approaches. We have established tonight that audio recordings exist capturing Meghan Markle in systematic verbal attacks on Kate, Princess of Wales. We have demonstrated through forensic analysis and multiple source corroboration that these recordings are authentic. We have shown how the content of these 2019 recordings predicted with remarkable accuracy the media narratives that subsequently dominated Sussex coverage. We have examined the legal, personal, and institutional consequences of these revelations. We have projected the most likely scenarios for how this evidence will reshape the ongoing royal family conflict. This investigation reveals not just private conversation, but systematic deception spanning 7 years that inverted victim and aggressor while manipulating global public opinion through coordinated media operations. The question before us now is not whether Meghan attacked Kate. The audio proves she did. The question is what consequences that proof generates for everyone involved. Type vindication in the comments if you believe Kate deserves public acknowledgement of what she endured while being falsely portrayed as aggressor. Type exposed if you believe Meghan's entire public narrative has now collapsed under weight of evidence. Type complicit if you believe Harry knew exactly what his wife was doing and participated willingly in the deception. Your responses help us understand how this evidence is being processed and what outcomes the public expects. If you want to know what happens when the palace releases the full evidence file, when Harry is forced to choose between wife and family with no middle ground remaining, when the media narratives that dominated 7 years are systematically dismantled with documentation that proves their falsity, you need to subscribe and hit that notification bell right now, because this story is accelerating toward definitive resolution and the next development could happen at any moment. Because what we have covered tonight is just the audio evidence of private attacks on Kate. The real question, the question that goes to the heart of Sussex credibility on every claim they have made, is whether any of their allegations about royal family treatment can survive scrutiny when compared against documented evidence that palace officials have been compiling since 2017. And that evidence is even more comprehensive than most observers understand. I am George Will, and I will see you in the next investigation.